Hello, I'm Phil, and today we're going to teach you how to make wine at home. Now we're going to do two methods, one cheap, fast, and easy. It's going to take literally 60 seconds. The other one is going to be a bit more advanced. We're going to get into a little bit more of the science, and you're going to have a much better end product. But as an experiment, I'm going to make both. After 3 weeks, let's see how we turned it out. Okay, so what we're going to need is 100% juice. I chose apple, but you could choose any variety you want, but you do want to make sure it's 100% as far as your juice is concerned. Next ingredient you're going to need is yeast. I can see people throwing up their hands already because I have active dry yeast, and it's not meant for brewing, it's more for baking. However, this is what we're going to use in a pinch, just for experiment's sake. And of course, you're going to need sugar. Now these three ingredients together are going to create alcohol, which is the end result. So what we need to do is open up our apple juice, and we're going to go ahead and pour out maybe a cup's worth. The reason we're doing that is we're making room for the cup of sugar that we're going to add to this product. So I've measured out a cup of regular white granulated sugar. We're going to use a funnel just to make things a little bit simpler, and we're just going to go ahead and pour that sugar on in, okay? Alrighty. You can pour it all at once, just make sure that it doesn't clump up on the inside of your funnel. You want to make sure that that funnel doesn't touch the juice. Alright, cool. So we roughly got most of our sugar. I'm going to pour a little bit of this excess juice in just to catch the granulated sugar that didn't catch the first time, and pour it around. Now we did not sanitize any of our devices, but that'll be used the next time. Put that lid on really tight and just give it a good shake. As you can see on the bottom, all of our granulated sugar is going to the bottom. We don't want that. We want everything mixed in completely. All right? No fluctuations or anything like that. So give it a nice shake. Right, so now we've got our juice, we got our sugar. Next thing we're gonna need is yeast. Alrighty. So at this point, typically I would do a reading. I would measure what the gravity is going to be to see what alcohol we're gonna end up with. Now alcohol is created when the sugars are converted to alcohol, and we have a way of measuring that, but for this, we're just gonna weigh it. So the next step that we're gonna do, and our final step really, is just our yeast. As I said before, this is dry yeast. It's recommended that this is hydrated before use, but there seem to be opposing camps on whether or not you should hydrate your yeast. I'm going to go ahead and measure 1 teaspoon of this yeast. Again, you don't need to do overkill or anything like that. It's probably already too much yeast. And we're just going to go ahead and pour that in on the top. Okay? Basically, some yeast, some sugar, some juice. You're going to have alcohol. Okay? So again, we're going to give this a nice shake. Get all those yeast activated. Nothing's on the bottom there, so that sugar is being dissolved, which is what we want. Cool. That's it. That's it. We are done with this. Super fast, super easy. This is like one step above prison wine, okay? So I don't like to waste anything. I don't know about you. There's still a little bit of room at the top, so we're gonna take that, that funnel and we're gonna add a little bit more of our juice back. The rest I will have for breakfast. Cool, there we are. Now again, we're not getting into the science of any of this stuff, we're just making some booze. Now the last part, when the sugar is being converted to alcohol, it's gonna release CO2, okay? That's gonna make this thing expand, okay? If you made it at home, you'll notice this thing will bulge. If you have glass, be careful, it could break. So we need to create an airlock. Otherwise, you're gonna be burping it, which means you're gonna have this lid, it's gonna blow up, and then you're just gonna slowly sort of let out the CO2, just like a fizzy drink. However, I don't wanna be burping it all day long. It's kind of like babysitting. Don't wanna do that at all. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a balloon on the top of it, which sounds strange. Now that balloon is going to capture all that excess CO2. However, I don't want my balloon expanding to a huge size. So what I'm going to do is I'm taking a pin here and I'm just going to put a hole. That's it. Just one really small hole, okay? Nothing's coming out of that hole, right? Unless it's filled with CO2, and certainly nothing's going in. I'm going to take our balloon. I got this at Party City, something like that. $2, okay? There it is. There it is. So we have our juice, we added 1 cup of sugar, we added 1 tablespoon of Fleischmann's dry active yeast, and we put a balloon on the top, and we are gonna let this sit. You're gonna see fermentation happening, you're gonna see bubbling, you're gonna see this thing start to expand. Depending on the temperature in your place, it could take a couple hours, could take maybe a day, but it'll happen in the first 3 days. So that is example number 1. We're gonna go ahead and set this aside. Now we're gonna get to my favorite part, which is where we're going a little bit more into the weeds. So you definitely wanna make something a little bit more advanced. I can tell you right now, This one I've made before, it's not gonna taste that great. I'll tell you why, it's the wrong type of yeast. We didn't sterilize anything. There's a whole lot of chances for everything to go wrong. So let's go ahead and turn to our second example. This is the more advanced way of making a decent wine at home. Again, we're gonna use the same product, 100% juice. We're gonna start exactly the same as we did before, okay? We're gonna be pouring out this. All right, so far so good. We got our juice, we have our sugar, and then we have our yeast alcohol, right? What I've done before that's a little different is we've sanitized, okay? We wanna sanitize every device, every piece of equipment that we're going to use. I just use Star San, easy to pick up at a home brewing shop, about $4. This little bottle will last you a very long time. Pour the water first, then pour 1 or 2 drops. If you do the opposite way, it's gonna look like a laundry machine just overflowed or something like that. Okay, so we have our juice over there. Now we're gonna go ahead and put in our sugar. Now I can put in granulated sugar as I did before. However, what I have here is priming sugar, okay? Now this is made for brewing. What's cool about priming sugar is that it's almost like powdered sugar. It's very, very thin, which makes it much faster and easier to dissolve. So let me go ahead and give this a quick rinse and a sanitization. You may have heard of the statement that brewing is 75% sanitation, and that is 100% true. So I'm gonna let this dry and we'll come right back. All right, welcome back. So we have everything cleaned again, which again is incredibly important. So we have our juice, we put some off to the side. I have my funnel again, and we're gonna go ahead and put in 1 cup of sugar. We're using priming sugar this time, okay? I tend to like this because it just dissolves a heck of a lot faster. And this 5-ounce bag roughly translates to a cup. So we're keeping our measurements the same for this. And let's just go ahead and put that in there. And I just love watching it just sort of cascade in there. So less vigorous shaking of this stuff will just go beautifully in. So you can get this at home brewing kits too. All right, so there we go. We have our sugar. We're gonna go ahead and put our cap back on. Keep in mind, everything is being sanitized, right? Same sugar, just a little bit easier to use, particularly if you're making beer. Okay, cool, so we can see that we're already clean there. So we've got that sugar dissolved quite easily, okay? Now this is where it gets a little tricky. So we're gonna be using a different type of yeast. We're gonna be using yeast that's actually meant for this sort of thing. So you can find this online. This is Lalvin D47. They've got very bizarre names like that. Okay, so this is a dry yeast that is made for wine. It's gonna give an alcohol content between 11 and 13%, typically, okay? Versus the dry yeast I use, that's gonna yield about 5%. So it's gonna taste more like a beer as far as alcohol content, which we don't want for our wine, right? That's pretty weak wine. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna up the ante, give us the regular ABV of a wine, and we're gonna hydrate the yeast first, which is something I did not do before. Now there's 2 opposing camps. Some people love hydrating yeast. They swear by it every single time. Other people do not, don't think it's necessary. Ideally, you just want the yeast to have the perfect environment to wake up, have a great temperature so they can do their job. So not too hot, not too cold. So on the back it says here, take 2 ounces of water and 2 ounces of water that are 95 degrees, okay? So I got my little gauge in there to tell me what the temperature is. Right? So falling a little bit below that, shouldn't be that bad. I should be able to heat that up a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and add this packet of yeast. Now yes, this entire packet of yeast is overkill for what we're making here today. Obviously I don't need that much yeast. Now this yeast, to tell you on the side how much it's made for. Usually a lot of commercial yeast packets are made for a 5-gallon brew. Obviously we're not doing a 5-gallon brew, not by any stretch of the imagination. This is just gonna be 32 ounces or 1 quart. So what we do is we hydrate that yeast by putting it in here, and then basically we just give it some time to do its thing. And it says 20 minutes, so you want to respect that. Do not go over, do not go under. If they say 20 minutes, they mean 20 minutes. This is a step that I usually like to skip. I usually like to throw the yeast right in. That's just my personal preference, and I haven't noticed any difference. However, we're gonna do this by the book. So let's set our timer 20 minutes. Alexa, set timer 20 minutes. Yeah, she'll do it. All right, so I'll see you then. And now we got our yeast. Now this is a lot. I poured basically the whole packet of yeast into 2 ounces because I didn't want to do the math. You don't need this entire thing. I mean, this is meant for gallons of wine. Obviously, we don't need it. It's not going to hurt, however, if we add more. That just means there's going to be more dead yeast floating in around the bottom. So we're going to do a process called racking. And that's when we take our fermentation vessel and transfer it to a second vessel so we don't keep all that dead sediment at the bottom, because we don't want that. It doesn't taste great for our alcohol. So in order to avoid that, I'm only going to pour half of this in here. Right? Yeah, it's 2 ounces. Pour half of it in there. Cool. So that's our mixture of the yeast, right? So now we got everything that we need. We have our yeast, we have our sugar, we have our juice. Give that thing a nice shake again. That yeast has already been rehydrated, so it's going to be going to work a little bit more quickly, as opposed to if you just took it from the fridge, you know, and put it directly into here. The yeast is like, whoa, what's going on? You know, I'm taking a lot of different temperatures at once. Okay. Now, I mentioned before about the Airlock. We're going to do a little bit more sophisticated this time. People see this and they're like, oh, I can't afford all this fancy stuff. It's like $2 or $3 at your local brew store. You can get it online. That yeast I showed you is for $10. You get like 10 packs. You know, this apple juice was $1.50, so this is highly affordable to do. Cool. So this is meant to be on this perfect sort of cap like this. Alrighty, got it. And we're going to take this and we put a little bit of water into it. And then this little cap goes on like here, and it should give us a nice little float. It'll float up once CO2 gets in it. So that is your Airlock, okay? Some people put vodka in here for sanitation purposes, and we just have it in there. So now anytime some CO2 is gonna come up, it's gonna come up through here, it's gonna raise this, and it's gonna come out these little vents at the top here, okay? So CO2 getting out, nothing else getting in. So that is it. These are our 2 examples, okay? This was done the cheap, fast, easy, dirty way. This was done with a little bit more precautions. It's not perfect. I'm not gonna say I'm perfect at this, but it does have a little bit more of, you know, just thought behind it, which I know you don't want to spend extra time with this, but trust me, you're gonna be waiting for 3 weeks anyway. Might as well spend an extra 5 minutes, invest in some of this equipment. So that's it. We will circle back in 3 weeks and we'll do a taste test and see which one we enjoy. All right, it's been 3 weeks and you're eager to try your wine. Of course, 3 weeks is the minimum recommended time to let your wine sit. However, the longer it sits, the better it gets. So 3 months, 6 months, whatever you want. You know wine gets better with age. So let's start with our Fast and Furious, our wine that we didn't sanitize. We used the wrong type of yeast. You know, we just sort of went willy-nilly with it. Not so much of a smell to it. That's a good start. Let's taste it. Okay. The taste, right? Pungent, just almost like a bite, like an after bite to it that makes it a little bit harder to swallow. So avoid that, okay? If you're in a pinch, of course, it's what you can do, but I really recommend you go through the steps. Now, I haven't tried this yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and say that this is probably a bit better tasting. So this is using the right type of yeast, sanitizing your equipment, really taking the time to do the steps. So you're gonna have to wait 3 weeks to a month to 3 months anyway. Why not spend 5 extra minutes, make sure you're doing it properly. Not very much of a smell to it. Clean, bright, sweet. I'd put it kind of in the neighborhood of a Chardonnay. Almost a little bit of pear and buttery to it. Obviously there's an apple base, so almost like a cider as well. Like a pear and apple cider, it's quite tasty. You know what, if I were to serve that to you in a restaurant, you wouldn't think twice. You'd be like, oh, this is their house white wine. Of course, it's not perfect, it's not premium, but using the few things that we had in our kitchen, I think we did a hell of a job. So please do this at home, comment, share results. I love getting feedback. Make sure that you sanitize your equipment, you use the right type of materials, okay? This is Phil, and thanks for watching this video on how to make your own wine.